G'day, I'm Gary from Southern California. In the following video I'm going to talk about my composting bins. If you're familiar with our channel, you may already know that I'm a big advocate for using wood chips in my garden. I've brought in a lot of arborist wood chips from tree trimmers. I'm going to continue using that. I do understand that some people don't have easy access to wood chips, so this is an alternative for those that can't obtain the wood chips. So most of these piles that I'm setting up, I'm using for leaf mould. Some are just for general compost. The ones I'm setting up here, I'm setting up between my two macadamia nuts. Having my compost set up in baskets keeps it nice and tidy. I have one major input that I have to purchase, and that is the 50-foot roll of fencing wire. The cost of a roll of wire is going to vary depending on where you live. Currently in my area, a roll is $45. I cut it down into 10-foot lengths. So out of one roll, I get 5 bins. So each bin costs around $9 each. For me, this is a fairly economical way of doing things. Once I have the bins set up, they're going to last a lifetime. The other inputs that I've got are the cardboard and, of course, the yard waste that I collect in our yard. As I go along, I'll explain a bit more about where I get my leaves from and the material that I add to my regular compost piles. Now, these are dual purpose. I'm not only composting, but I'm also feeding my trees as I do it. I like to set up my piles near fruit trees that I'm growing. The compost feeds my trees and the trees feed my compost. Now, how do the trees feed the compost? Well, as this breaks down, some of the nutrients from the pile go into the ground and feed my trees. Where I'm standing here, I'm on about 9 inches of wood chips. So the wood chips have mycorrhizal fungi already established. As the pile breaks down, the tree roots will move in, and when I harvest the finished product, I'll also be collecting some of the fungal spores, microbes and other life forms that are associated with the roots. I have a number of bins set up around my other fruit trees. I've got 2 set up near my ice cream bean, and I've got another one set up near my jackfruit. Anyhow, I'll show you how I set this one up, and I'll go over some of the leaves that I collect in my yard. The way I set this up, I start with a roll of 3-foot by 50-foot fencing wire. This can be obtained pretty much anywhere. A lot of your hardware stores will sell that. I cut a 10-foot length. That gives me a 3-foot diameter bin. I leave the length of wire on one end. I trim it down on the other. I slide it to the second rung. So I've got one rung here. And just fold them over. If you didn't want to use your hands, you could use a pair of pliers. I generally don't need the pliers. So you just fold the wire over and then it locks into place. When the compost is done, I simply go back and unclip it. All the compost falls to the ground. You can shovel it up, use what you want. What remains on the ground stays in place and feeds my trees. I've positioned it here so I can walk around it, so it's not in the way. It's out of the way, it's at the back of my garden. By having it set up like this, it keeps everything neat and tidy. What I line the inside with is simply cardboard boxes. So you can get cardboard boxes pretty much anywhere. Most of ours we have from deliveries to the house. So I open up the cardboard. It's a lot easier and faster if you can use large boxes. I add them to the center like that. If I need to, I cut them down to size. Now I've got them roughly in position, I start to fill it. Now the source of material that I've got, I've got all sorts of material this time of the year from just trimming. So I've got spent asparagus fronds that can go in the bottom. I've been pruning some of my bottle brush trees, so that takes a little longer to break down, so that goes into the bottom. Assorted greens. I'm just going to move this around, level it out. I'm going to push it around until the cardboard starts to take the shape of the wire basket. Once I have my first layer in place, I add a layer of green material. What I'm using here is actually chicken manure from the bottom of a chicken pen. So that'll be my nitrogen source. For a cold composting bin like this, I'm not going to fuss too much with the carbon to nitrogen ratio. I'm just adding the extra nitrogen to speed things up a bit. It still could take 6 months to a year for it to break down and be usable. Once it's set up, I don't turn it, I just water it down to keep it hydrated. I add all sorts of things to this. And this time of the year, I've got a lot of cuttings. I've got sweet potato vines that I trim back so I can get to my walkways. So all that goes in. I've been cleaning out my pond, and some of these pond plants, they're all going in. So that's another nitrogen layer. And I just keep adding until I've got it filled to the top. Once I get it part way up, I like to get in and stomp it down. So I've got this old washing machine basket that I use to step on. So I've got this half full now, and I just stomp it around, and that starts to push the cardboard into the shape of the basket. So now the cardboard's circular. For my leaf mould pile, I collect all sorts of leaves. I know coming up in the fall, a lot of people are going to have an unlimited supply of deciduous leaves, and this is the time of the year perhaps you should be looking towards setting up for that. When it comes to sources of leaves, I have a wide variety of evergreen leaves that I can collect in my own yard. This plant here is plumbago, it's from South Africa. It can be grown from zone 9 to 11. Here in zone 10A, it actually grows like a weed. I really don't have to water it, it's very drought tolerant. It produces these nice blue flowers pretty much year round, so it's an attractive plant, and it produces a really large amount of biomass. It's a very vigorous shrub that has vining tendencies. We have a large hedge of it growing along our driveway here. It requires a lot of maintenance. I use a string trimmer, and the string trimmer cuts it down into small pieces. The small pieces are ideal for my composting. There are a number of leaves that some people are concerned about. 30 plus years ago in my garden in Australia, I used eucalyptus leaves. I still use them today. Any compounds from leaves that contain growth inhibitors or toxins will be broken down within 6 months. That includes walnut, oleander and eucalyptus. These compounds are designed to protect living plants. Once they're separated, they're no longer useful. Some people won't use oak leaves, they contain tannins. I rake up the leaves around our live oak and I don't have a problem with it. We grow bougainvilleas. They're a very attractive plant, but once they finish flowering, they drop their bracts. The bracts surround the flowers, so they're actually modified leaves. When setting up a leaf mould bin, my goal is to create a lot of humus. To help that along, I stomp on it to compress it and crush the leaves down. This reduces the size of the leaves and restricts the amount of oxygen available. If you Google how leaf mould is made, you'll see that it's created in an anaerobic environment. As I add each layer, I thoroughly water it down. After about 6 months, my leaf mould chicken manure compost has broken down enough that I can start harvesting. Because I rake it off the ground, it's going to contain a lot of coarser material that I'm going to want to remove, including wood chips and rocks, that sort of thing. If I only need a small amount, I hand sift it through 1/4 inch hardware mesh that I've cut down and placed inside a nursery flat. The end product has an earthy smell. It's a nice rich brown colour. I can add it directly to my soil mixes, and it's full of earthworms. I can't tell you exactly how long it's going to take to break down because I don't know your climate conditions, I don't know your growing conditions. We're in an arid climate, so things break down differently here than say if you were in a wetter environment. Because we have low relative humidity, the air's dry all the time, and what I've found is by adding the cardboard, I don't get as much evaporation out the sides of it. If I just use the wire, it will evaporate out the sides and I'll have to use a lot more water to try to keep it moist. Without the cardboard, in the first 10 inches to a foot, it's always dry on the inside. It only stays wet in the center and it tends to wick out. So in the drought conditions like we have here, it's good to line your compost bin. I know some people like to stack all their compost in a big pile. I prefer to have it contained. It looks a lot neater. I do have a couple other ways of lining it. I use black plastic sheeting for some of them. Cardboard's free, so I've switched over to the cardboard method. It's always a good time to start a compost pile. This time of the year, a lot of people are going to start collecting a lot of garden material, so this would be a good time to start setting things up. So by next spring, you'll have plenty of material to work with. All you have to do is set it up, wait. There's no turning, this is just a cool composting system. If you got something out of this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to leave a comment, feel free to leave a comment. With that, thanks for watching, and don't forget to eat what you grow. Goodbye.